Congratulations! You just clicked on a top 10 list made by someone who's objectively correct about everything! Unfortunately, I don't have the time to play every game ever, so we'll be working with just the games I beat this year, regardless of release date. Compared to last year, I played a lot more games, but I think the average quality was a bit lower. Everything on here I can vouch for as something worth your time and money, just don't expect the first few to be groundbreaking peaks of their respective genres or anything. This is supposed to be a quick and easy video, so let's cut the rambling and just start the list already. On the surface, Dead Rising 2 is pretty run-of-the-mill. It's just another zombie survival game with co-op. But in the modern market, it stands out by being, well, good. Good enough to hold up 12 years after release. It's campy as all hell. Between the story, the weapons, and the voice acting, it very clearly doesn't expect you to take it too seriously, which helps cover up the somewhat jank and aged mechanics, as well as greatly enhance the co-op experience, giving you plenty to make fun of and laugh at with a friend. The open-ended gameplay makes it great for co-op play as well, which I greatly appreciate as someone who's always on the lookout for co-op experiences, letting you either dick around and do the bare minimum or optimize the objectives by abusing the ability to be in two places at once. On top of that, it's just plain fun. The most original title, it is not, but damn if it's not a good time solo or with a friend, which is a lot more than the competition can say. I will add just one footnote to this. If you're gonna get the game, get off the record. It's basically the same game, but better. Let's be real. Everyone who's even slightly invested with the indie scene has at least heard of The Binding of Isaac. On its own, it's kinda just a generic dungeon crawler roguelike. Back in 2011, sure, it was pretty unique, but in modern days, the genre is not even close to lacking. However, after returning to the game this year with all the DLC, including the recent Repentance, there is something significant to be had. Now, the first 10 to 20 hours where it's mostly just trudging through the old content, which is anywhere from boring to frustrating, is a pretty big wall to get through, but beyond that, it's actually pretty fun. The sheer number of characters and items and all the ways they synergize are almost asking you to break the game, and the more you play, the more ways you find to achieve exactly that. There are a few bullshit design choices you have to either deal with or patch with mods, but after that, this game can seriously last you hundreds of hours. Everhood is a very interesting game. More specifically, Everhood is a game that is very flawed in what it attempts to be. I'll go in approximate order of when I noticed the issues. Firstly, as much as you may be told otherwise, this is not a rhythm game. The fact that the projectiles come at you on beat is a selling gimmick that you quickly forget about, as it does not impact how you play whatsoever. Secondly, the world lacks any sort of cohesion. They're just kinda loosely strung together areas more than anything else, which on its own isn't a big deal, but with my next point it starts mattering more. The story and characters also don't seem to develop. Again, in a vacuum, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but this game very clearly wants the player to care about the characters and story. It's a really hard feeling to describe, so I'll have to rely on this analogy. It feels like the developers played Undertale, enjoyed Undertale, and then thought to themselves, yeah, we can do that. This may sound really pretentious, and I can't say for sure what the developers were intending, but this is certainly how it felt like playing through it. The dialogue, art style, character designs, area designs, and hell, even the late game story rug pulls feel incredibly inspired by Undertale. Which, again, not a bad thing on its own. I love Undertale too. My issue with it is, though, is that none of it feels developed. The characters don't go anywhere beyond their surface-level quirks, your actions don't seem to hold any weight, and the meta-commentary about morality holds no weight outside of the in-game universe. I felt no connection to the characters or world, so when the in-game came around, it didn't feel like my actions in-game stemmed from my own will, but rather what the game wanted me to do. All this being said, the game is still fun as shit. Banger OST, unique combat system, and comedic writing aplenty. Everhood is still well worth your money and time, it just kind of bites to see so much wasted potential. Resident Evil 3 is fun. You shoot zombies and stuff. It's polished and looks pretty. I really don't have much to say. It's pretty run-of-the-mill, but it's still really good. It's short though, so get it on sale. While there isn't much going on with Thomas Was Alone, it made me sympathize and connect with literal colored squares, which has to say something about its quality. It's a really touching story with fun little puzzles. I don't want to underrate it here, but there's not a whole lot that I can say without spoiling it, so just play it on a rainy day or something. It's good. Play it.
Meow?
Alright, Inscryption, back at it with the highly rated meta indie games that I feel are flawed. The less you know about Inscryption going into it, the better it is. If you are within these categories, I recommend that you play it and skip this section entirely. There's a timestamp on screen for you, I promise I won't hold it against you. The issues I'm going to discuss aren't big enough to ruin it as a game. It's still really good, just go play it. I don't plan on spoiling anything specific, but again, just best to go in blind. Alright, last chance to skip. In terms of the lore, world, atmosphere, and story, Inscryption is fucking excellent. It does things that very few other games have the gall to do. This game is fucking vibes, dude. There's so much to dig into and analyze within this world. My main problem with it, however, is how it sacrifices its gameplay to do what it does. I don't just mean that the gameplay is lacking, I mean that they actively decide to make their gameplay worse for the sake of being lore accurate. Each of the 4 scribes have their own values and priorities, meaning that Act 1 and Act 3 are well developed in some ways and pretty lacking in others, while Act 2 is just a chaotic mess of clashing systems. In my opinion, the game gets worse to play with each act, which is ironic since Act 3 is supposedly the one created by the scribe who prioritizes gameplay and mechanics. Act 1 is the iconic one that everyone knows, and by far the best. It has an atmosphere so thick and lush that you could cut it with a knife. And the gameplay, while still fun, seems to be pretty reliant on RNG, where one good card can completely win your run or one bad encounter will completely snuff you out. If you're the type of person to enjoy quote-unquote breaking games, then this will be no issue for you. However, despite me normally preferring strategy and consistency over breaking games, I still had fun because you still had to think about what you're doing to progress. Act 2 took this steamroll heavy style and cranked it up to 100. Every encounter felt like you either just win or lose instantly, or at the very least within 3 turns. As you'd imagine, 4 separate deck gimmicks at play simultaneously doesn't work very well. But at the very least, you can safely ignore 1, 2, or even 3 of the gimmicks if you want. Most likely you'll be ignoring the magic and possibly energy decks, since both of those require some level of commitment to use most of the better cards with, while the blood and bone decks both will gain their currencies regardless of what you're playing with, on top of just being generally more familiar from Act 1. In Act 3, the atmosphere becomes cold and flat and very repetitive, and the cards in play also are severely lacking in variety. The more linear nature on top of the smaller pool of cards you can have make each encounter feel a lot less like a deck builder and a lot more like just a puzzle game. Act 3, excluding the bosses, which were actually really fun and engaging, felt incredibly monotonous as a consequence, to the point where I was actually considering dropping the game entirely once I hit a wall. The finale, however, is absolutely magical. And in retrospect, as a whole, Inscryption is an insanely unique game with so much to bite into and enjoy. Resident Evil 2, unlike its younger brother, actually has a lot going on under the cover. After the Dead by Daylight incident of 2021, I've warmed up to horror as a genre a lot more, first via classic slasher movies and then games starting here. Resident Evil 2 has an amazing pace to it where you constantly feel on edge, barely scraping by with the resources you have while still getting stronger as time goes on. Unlocking more and more of RPD was insanely satisfying, with intertwining puzzles that led you all throughout the map. The difficulty always felt just right, where you could manage to pull through everything handed to you, but just barely. How the gameplay loop combined nerve-wracking corridor searches, white-knuckle combat scenarios that threatened your life and your resource pool, and then puzzles and route pathing led to an insanely unique experience that kept me invested, entertained, and scared without any cheap jump scares. You ever play a game that feels like it was made with you specifically in mind? That's what Going Under felt like to me. A colorful and lighthearted world on the surface. You play as Jackie, the intern, who whacks job-themed goblins and ghouls as you realize everyone is suffering under late-stage capitalism, scarily reminiscent of the real world in this very beginner-friendly roguelike. The combat is simple yet engaging, with fun and varied decisions throughout each run, and the characters are so delightfully realistic and fun to talk to. My personal favorites are Kara, the sarcastic and blunt software engineer who loves violence against both billionaires and corporate drones alike, and Swamp, who, this isn't gonna make sense to everyone, but, this is Swamp. Everything about this game works so well and preaches to the choir that is, me, and other underpaid tech nerds who are unwilling slaves to capitalism. When the credits rolled, my heart so desired to rate this a 5 out of 5, but my brain told me that I had to hold back a little bit. Objectively speaking, it is a little simple in gameplay, especially how each of the main dungeons and bosses are repurposed twice over. But pretty ironically, any area of this game that could be improved in wasn't, for the reason that the developers literally did not have enough money to make it as good as they wanted it to be. So yeah, if there's one lesson to be learned from this, it's to eat the burn down Amazon headquarters. You should spread the word about this hidden gem, because I am dying to see what this team can do with a flexible budget. Oh, I completely forgot to mention the music as well. Absolutely top for its class. Just give it a listen. Rhythm Doctor is a rhythm game, go figure, that is currently in early access. But if the quality of the full release keeps up to the same standard as its current state, I have no doubt in my mind that it will be the peak of the genre. The story and characters are touching and incredibly human. The gameplay is simple, yet gets mixed up and developed so frequently that you never lose your engagement. There's ample motivation to get better scores, and there's some amazingly triple visuals that I will not be spoiling here. The only thing that I find this game lacks, ironically, is, well, amazing music. There's a few bangers scattered in there for sure, but for the most part the tracks are pretty simple. Nothing ear-grating or anything, just not something I'd be wanting to add to a playlist. If you've been keeping up with me on Twitter or on Discord, then you already know what's in this slot. This game has taken a violently tight and persistent grip on my mind throughout this year, and I do not see it stopping anytime soon. This is some real personality-altering shit, and I mean it. This game is like all-time top 10 at least. It's not just a game, but a plague that I have been infected with and have been willingly spreading to as many people as possible. Lobotomy Corporation. possibly the hardest sell of a game that I have ever played, while simultaneously being one of the best once you actually get into the thick of it. I'm just gonna put this out here right now. I will be making a full-length video dedicated to this fucking thing. There is way too much that goes into it for me to convince you why it's actually a good game, and this video is supposed to be brief, so I'm not even gonna bother here. This is one of the best games ever made. Simultaneously, this game is fucking stupid. It hates you. It will fuck you up in every way. It's a management sim where anything that can go wrong will go wrong. It feels utterly unfair at first, before you eventually drop your standard for what's fair so low that the standard may as well be non-existent. The gameplay loop is kinda like building a house of cards. You're given a chunk of new information that you gotta remember each in-game day. It's manageable at first, but slowly becomes a fucking tower barely holding itself together, and if you forget one little detail, a chain reaction can happen that brings it all toppling down. It's gruesome and dark and sadistic and gives you depression. What's not to love? Playing this game almost necessitates that you change your mentality about how systems should work. And the smartest part about this extended rant is that I'm not necessarily just talking about game mechanics. This game is a work of fucking art, and I will never back down from that opinion. You're just gonna have to take my word for it for now, though. I promise that in the future I'll make a nice, elaborate video essay for you all, alright? But for now, that wraps up this year's list. I was a little lazier about it than last year, hopefully it didn't show too much. I got a big project that I'm working on right now, but I still wanted to get this out because these videos are a nice opportunity to talk about games that I've been playing outside of the big videos. I have a really good feeling about this coming year, so stick tight with me, dear viewers. I will most certainly be seeing you soon.